Do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this is the Tuesday, May 19th, 2020 Port Authority Board meeting. And if we could do the roll call.
Chairman Carl Roth.
Here.
Member Ron Padova.
Here.
Member Chris Leeds.
Here.
Okay, we've got the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes approved. All right, only announcements that I have is that from our last meeting, there were a couple of things that I was going to go to council on, but since that was a little problematic, I did not. But just what I had from the minutes was to pursue with the city as far as how we could maybe get the restore funds for the DMMA site sooner. That was one item. And then to mark or remove the dredge signage in Miller's Bayou. Were there anything else that you guys recalled?
No.
No.
Okay, so that's what I had, but once we can get into one of the council meetings, I'll follow up with that and anything from this meeting as well. Ronnie, you got anything as far as just general announcements or general thoughts?
General announcement is, I know years ago on the board, we had talked about, we've been getting complaints about the shrimpers speeding up, going out in the evening, and we had, I think we had made a motion to talk to approach the Port Richey Police Department, to go talk to them, and they did, and everything was a lot better. It might be time to do that again. I don't know if you've noticed it, but I have. It's not, I see some of the same boats that have been there for years and years and years, and they're very good, and then maybe you have some new ones or new captains that just seem to be in a hurry, and
Yep.
I just say, just leave 5 minutes early.
Yep, that's as,
So
yeah, they go
is there a
zipping
way
out.
that we could get with whoever is at the police station and do get with them, maybe they can go around and talk to them and just mention, I think that's what happened last time.
I think that's a good idea.
Do we need to make a motion to refer that to the police department, or is that just a?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I would assume not
Okay.
on anything like that, but what I'd like to do is, let me just take it back. What I was thinking about is that I tried to get the police boat out, and I'll come to you.
Yeah.
Tried to get the police boat out the other day because there was a shopping cart in the middle of the river from Wally World. The police boat was not available. So with the rapid movement of boats down the river, one of the things that I thought about was we don't need a police boat. If the police would sit by on Sunset Avenue in the afternoon or at 7 o'clock when the shrimpers go out and hail them
Yep.
with their hailer and say, boys, come over and I will educate you now, or I can provide you with this opportunity, was a thought.
Yep.
I think that's a great idea. I had mentioned before, and I don't know if I mentioned it at this Port Authority meeting back years ago, but I know to get the police boat or law enforcement on the river is tough. But there's no reason why patrol Saturdays and Sundays from 4 or 3:30 till 5, when everybody's coming in, they can't sit on and look at the river, sit over by, the cul-de-sac on certain roads, view of a river, notice the vehicles, and either use the halo or just go over to Nick's Park where you see them and at least explain to them the no wake. There's a lot of activity, jet skis flying around in the river, doing donuts out in front of no wakes around
Yeah.
other boats, and there just seems to be a lack of law enforcement on the river, and I've never seen so much activity on the river.
Yeah.
Right, it's been really
unbelievably busy. Yeah.
Could I make a suggestion that, where the task was really to go forth and really address this dredging? But one of the things that I wanted to do is hold back some time at each meeting that we could have a more serious conversation about this particular
Yeah.
item or any particular item.
Yeah, safety and
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you guys are okay with that, why don't we put that on the first meeting once we get through this? And if you guys are in agreement, then we'll chunk that in as that block. So the last, let's say, 15 minutes of the meeting will be for some other topic
That's fine.
besides. Does that sound good?
It does, yes.
Okay. All right, Chris. Anything?
Nothing other than that.
Okay. All right, so what I had done was, based on my commitment the last time, was to put together a potential timeline on how we could go through the dredging. So what I'd like to do is just walk you through my thought, and then no pride in authorship here, feel free to shoot holes in it. So this was my thought. So this was the first meeting today. So we would review this timeline, and there were a total of 8 productive meetings and then a feedback. And we agree on the timeline that makes sense to you guys, and then familiarize ourselves with the dredging plan overall. Where are the channels, what's involved, et cetera, et cetera. Next meeting would be to look at the quotation for the dredge that is attached in this document is the one real live dredging proposal that we got. Go ahead, Ronnie.
I have a question on that too.
Okay.
When I look at the bid, attachment A, bid schedule phase 1,
You're page 3?
yes. It says, when I'm looking at it, the mobilization, 50,000, demobilization, 50,000. It seems like every phase, there's $100,000 between setting up mobilization and demobilization. How are the phases going to run consecutive, or is there time in between? Because
Because if you did all
that
three of
is
these
half
together,
of your bid
right.
is just for them to bring it there to mobilization and demobilization. On every one, it's $100,000 out of the whole price. That just seems to be a lot of money when you look at the dredge material. Cubic yards is 40,000, but to bring them mobilization and demobilization is 100,000.
Yep.
And it's basically the same on a lot of it. The most of the expense on all these bids is the mobilization and demobilization. Is there,
I don't have any context other than what's right here.
okay, well,
Yeah, that's-
that
we
is
need
my
to explore
question.
that,
I mean,
yeah.
if they're gonna do channels so many, and then they're gonna go on to the other one, or do they do the channels, pull the equipment, put it somewhere, then bring it back, and then do the next channels? Is there a place to store the equipment so we don't have that fee of every time? Because that just seems like a lot of money.
Yeah, $700,000 proposal goes to $500,000 if you just do all 3 phases at one time. If that's just bringing the equipment and taking it back 3
And
times.
That was
Right.
one of, like, for example, 26A, one of the things I glanced at was the volume for 26A is not associated with that channel. It's one partial leg of 26. But I just did a quick skim, but that's why on the first meeting, or meeting 2, we would go through this in more detail, identify issues, and then come back to it. And then also during that meeting, look at a potential resident dredge questionnaire to try to engage the residents to see what kind of interest is out there. So we would work on that and figure out how it would be distributed, what kind of questions should go in there, et cetera, et cetera. And then look at who at the county we should be working with or could be working with as part of the dredging effort, and the same thing at the state level. So that was meeting 2.
Okay.
Meeting 3, and I'll just go through these unless you guys want to
That's
stop.
fine.
Meeting 3 was to review the resident dredge questionnaire results. So if we get the results from the questionnaire, and also hopefully at that time we've engaged some of the residents, and what we could do is highlight that we had planned on discussing some number of channels, I put 6 down there, in more detail. So we could have resident interaction, they could ask questions, we could go through that. So I broke that up over 3 meetings, figuring if we had an hour, and again, I'm assuming an hour slot on each one of these. Then this is all kind of information gathering for us. Then after knowing who the county folks were, try to get some of those county representatives in, whoever we thought was appropriate on what they could do, how they could help us and all that. So we'd have that information. Do the same thing with this at the state level in meeting 7. And then finally on meeting 8 was kind of pull all this together, identify priorities, our recommendations, and take that forward to council. So that was my thought on how to reach out, how to kind of get us all on the same page, and then figure out how to move forward in a reasonable way. And what I assumed at these meetings was that, if we had an hour, we'd spend about 45 minutes here, and then we'd have 15 minutes for another topic of our choice. So that was the rationale. So I'll open it up. Chris, thoughts, changes?
No, I think it's reasonable. We probably, you're saying in that second meeting, we'll come up with the questions during that meeting. I think we probably should all just come with
Prepared.
a prepared list, right, of questions, and then jam them together and
Right.
let's decide what's important and what's not, and how many questions we can handle.
Exactly.
So, right,
So-
some pre-work.
Right, exactly. Homework to bring to, just so we're not burning our daylight here, if we can get through it a little faster.
Yeah. And it would probably make sense if we identify somebody from the county. Would we want to, is there a way to reach out to them in the interim to say, are there any things you want to know when we do this questionnaire, so we get their input once rather than multiple times?
Good point. Or at the state level too,
Yeah.
so any of those players. Anything we can incorporate in.
Yep.
Lonnie?
So I can do my homework. When I look at these, going back to these bids, phase 1, 2, and 3, was that the channels, the commercial ones, 18, 26, and 26A? What is that, which channels are they talking about with those? This bid that they had submitted way back when?
1, 18, and 26A.
Do it, okay, channel,
1, but I left out 1, my bad.
so phase 1 was what channel?
Hang on. Going the wrong way. 2610. Phase, that was channel 1.
Channel 1. And
Phase 2
2.
was 18, and phase 3 was 26A. My best guess.
Okay. But it just makes it for me to put those in with the exact channels and where we're at with that, so I can
Do,
make my questions.
do you think this is too much time, or
Well, I
in the
was,
first start, or, I mean, Kentucky windage-wise, or do you,
if we're doing monthly meetings, 3, 4, and 5,
I didn't go to monthly yet.
right, yeah.
So depending on what you want to do.
Yeah, if we're talking about pushing out 6 months before we understand what the residents want and then meeting with Pasco County, if there's a way to compress 3, 4, and 5, or maybe have meetings every 2 weeks for that, right? I think that gets us to.
I don't see the reason why we can't do 3, 4, and 5, because if we're looking for residents' input and nobody shows up, then why hold another one the next month, and then they go,
Yeah.
well, oh, I missed my channel.
Yeah, I'm going to show back up.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Right.
I think if we do them all, anybody that's interested and has some input will come that night.
Yeah.
And if we need more time, because there's
can
been a lot of
always-
people, then we'll just do it the next meeting.
Right.
I'm good with that.
Okay. And then, if I recall, we were going to have the city manager reach out on the funds that were already due to the city from the county, that the county's been holding, and I just don't see that step in here right?
That's what I was going to try to do with the next follow-up with the council, to say, hey, this is our recommendation, what kind of things need to be done? And certainly, we've got some changes going on
Yeah.
with the city manager now, so, but that's what I was looking at, was kind of outside of this, but didn't want to step on toes, wanted to make sure we were in coordination with who those people were.
Do we want to put meetings 6 and 7 together, depending upon who we get here? Because if there's questions that we need to, if we get the county here and we're asking them questions and they say, well, we have to, I don't know, we have to check with SwiftMud, would it be easier to have them all together at the same time in case SwiftMud says, well, we got to talk to the county on that? And we did that last week.
Yeah,
I think that's a great idea.
I like these.
So potentially combine 3 through 5, potentially combine 6 and 7.
Yes.
Depending on who the players are and who we can get to potentially show.
All right, so that limits it down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Potentially.
Potentially, yeah.
Cool. Does that work?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Meetings 3, 4, and 5, if we get 600 responses back from the community, right, and there's a huge, it may warrant
You can
more
call another one.
conversations. Right, yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys have dealt with questionnaires and surveys historically, but
A
you
lot.
probably know that the general turnaround is small.
Very much.
So what I was hoping is that we may have a couple of different channels. Maybe we can do something on Facebook. Maybe, I know we're sending out utility bills now. I don't know if we could do an insert on that, and maybe do something online where they could go to the city website and do something online where we don't have to do the mailing piece. But that's the conversation with maybe Sal or somebody else in the city
Agreed.
once we decide on how we want to go after it. But if we had multiple ways, then we can come back with pretty good confidence to say, we reached out
Yeah.
and we had 3,000 people that were interested, or we had 3.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Do we still have the monthly bulletin that goes out from the city?
Quarterly.
Set up quarterly?
Quarterly.
Our quarterly newsletter, the recent one has been postponed due to COVID-19.
When do they expect that to go out?
Well, we're releasing the next one. The next one to be released is the hurricane newsletter. That's going to provide all the information for.
Well, I'm just saying,
the
if
hurricane.
it's within the next month, can we put the questionnaire in there?
That's a possibility. I'd have to find out when the next
Because then
one
you're
is.
piggybacking off of that goes to everybody,
Right,
and it's done.
right.
Agreed.
No, I'm good with that. Multiple ways, if however we can get it. So that just kind
Yeah,
of
'cause Facebook, not everybody's on.
Yeah.
Okay, going back to what we had talked
Earlier
about, so, but the bulletin, that goes to everybody's home, and they have their chance right there to respond.
It's a good call.
So one of the things that we may want to do is look at meeting 2, maybe doing that a little sooner so we could go through the questionnaire, depending on how it goes.
We could go every 2 weeks, because
Yeah,
got plenty of time.
I'm not traveling.
Cool, not a problem.
I mean, so we could go, we're at 1 now, meeting 2 could be in 2 weeks. I'll look at
Okay.
your guys' schedule. I can
Yeah.
tell you now, I'll be here.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
will
we'll
miss
just
it.
coordinate with Sal and see what
Okay.
we can do.
Right, and then if we can get that questionnaire, I guess we can't do 3, 4, and 5 until the questionnaire's out.
Out
So that's
Right.
what's gonna postpone the meetings, because if we don't get it to the residents in a month or so and get results, we can't go forward.
I did not see that being critical. It would be nice to correlate it to that particular
Right.
meeting. So if you're on, we're talking about channel 3, and you're a resident there, that would be nice to have your results. But if you show up at our meeting, I don't think we have to discuss that. We could do it at a later time.
Yeah.
Just so, I don't want to get ourselves held up on something
Okay.
when we can move forward on it, but if we
All
can,
right.
does that make, is
It
that
does.
good?
Yeah. So if 3, 4, and 5 come after 6, we're gonna keep going anyway, right? You know what I mean? Because if we do
Right.
2 in 2 weeks, but then we don't get any questionnaires out to anybody, we don't get any feedback for 3, 4, and 5, that's what I'm saying. Are we
Right.
just gonna maybe wait until we get something back
Well,
before we go to 6?
I-
Or,
I watched the last, or I guess it was 2 Pasco commission meetings ago, and one of the first places that the dredging thing gets tied to knot is, well, are residents willing to pay or are they
Right.
not, right? So unless we have that kind of feedback,
Right.
I think the county, once we get to that county meeting, the pushback's gonna be, well, are your residents willing to put in?
and if we
'Cause
say
that-
we haven't
that-
even heard from
That
them.
impacts the pool of money.
Right, so I guess right now, I guess the priority is to get something out to the residents. So if we know, Sal, when that bulletin's going out, or would it be September? Or is it June?
I'll have to look into that and see when the next, if it's going to be a summer newsletter or not. Like I said, I know the hurricane one is about to go out, and I have to see if they're going to release the other one or wait till the next quarter. Just for your information, 2 weeks from now will be the 2nd of June. So if you guys want to book that now and we can lock that in, that'll be fine.
It's fine for me.
Sure.
Okay.
So June
Um,
2nd.
And I think the next, the other thing that you'd want to consider is the body of the questionnaire, and what questions do you actually want to place in that, so then we can
Right.
gather that information together and then see what we can fit on either a utility bill, or it's going to have to be an individual mailer, or on the newsletter.
I think it would be easier is if you had the newsletter, and if it's already kind of set up, because it could be going out, hurricane season is here, it
Yeah.
starts June 1st, right?
Right.
And if that's the one that's going out June 1st, if we can't actually get it printed on there, we can stick a,
Well, that one's done. That one's already in print right now, getting ready to go out.
okay, is there a way to stick a little flyer in there?
I'd have to find out.
Okay, because otherwise, now we're waiting until the next quarter. So
We're
the
just doing a
newsletter's
separate
out.
mailing.
Or it might do, like I said, we have other options. Like I said, that he mentioned the utility bill, a separate mailer could be done.
Doesn't that come out of Atlanta or something, the utility bills?
Well, yeah, they come out of Atlanta, but we have room for them.
Makes sense.
Or like I said, we could do a complete, a separate mailer. I'd have to see, about the funds for that, but have to see if we could do a separate mailer and have it sent to the specific addresses that this would affect to. That's another option.
Yeah, because it's basically only the people on waterfront,
Water,
On
yeah.
the waterways.
on these specific,
Yeah,
Well,
could be.
maybe.
There's, yeah.
What do we want to do?
well,
So,
you can't assess people that don't live on the water.
But it's not just gonna be assessment questions, right?
That's the main
That's
question
the-
the county's
I
gonna
totally
wanna know,
agree,
because
yeah.
the point is that if you don't live on the water, and they say, well, we're gonna assess houses, they're gonna say, well, you can't assess me because I don't live on the water.
Right.
But yet they're gonna be, oh yeah, we need to dredge. So it's almost like a paving assessment, but you don't live on the street that's being paved.
Right, I get you.
They're not gonna send you that assessment. So if you're only talking to people on these canals, the parcels on these canals, those are the ones that really need to be notified, because they're the main ones that are gonna have the interest in it, and if there is an assessment, it's going to those parcels, it's not
Right.
going to anybody that lives not on the water.
Right.
So the mailing should be smaller, okay?
Absolutely.
And directly to those people. Again, we have to come up with it, but it's gotta be, do you want your canal dredged, and are you willing to pay an assessment? Basically, that's all we wanna know.
Yeah,
unless, of course, we go broader and we assessed everybody in the city.
I don't know.
No, how tenable that would be.
Well, if you're a county commissioner, it's not gonna be at all. Because you can imagine people that don't even live on the water and don't have a boat getting assessed for the waterway behind someone's house that's gonna bring their property value up. So I would rather not go that route.
Okay?
I don't think it's gonna, I think it's gonna cause more headache than anything else.
When they led into that, when this all got shelved, that was kind of the stopping point, was that question.
sure.
That's what was on. So why don't we do this is, why don't we put some questions together for the survey, keep it relatively short, thinking that if we did an insert in the bill, what could we do relatively short? I'm assuming the easiest way to get feedback from the people would be, can you drop it off at City Hall in a Dropbox? That shows some level of interest rather than just filling out the questionnaire and there's a self-addressed deal and we
Yeah.
don't have to deal with the mailing costs. There shouldn't be an issue there.
Yep.
Absolutely. If they're interested, they're going to drop it off, and if you get no reply, then
Answers that question.
answers that question.
Yep.
So that would be one piece. I would like to think that we could probably put something on the city website that they could come in and fill that questionnaire out here, even though they didn't get one. No cost on that, but it also shows some incentive for people to do something in another channel.
Is there a way to, instead of actually finding out, you can find out, but I mean going down every canal, every parcel, getting the address, sending in the questionnaire, just basically put on the Port Richey website, if you live on waterfront, these canals, come in and take the survey for dredging your property. And leave it up to them, just come in and come here, they get the thing and they've got the questions and they hand it in. I mean,
Sal, would the website facilitate like a Survey Monkey or something, you know, either show up at City Hall, fill out a survey, or click on this link and answer these 5 questions, or is that?
I have to speak to the assistant city manager. She handles the website.
Well-
I don't know for certain what it's capable of.
Okay.
If we can install something like that, like Survey Monkey on there. But I'll definitely put that as one of my questions to bring
Okay.
to their attention.
well,
Please,
then we
thank
run
you.
into the same problem, what if the people don't have an internet?
Yeah, but I'm thinking if they have the option of coming here, right?
Come
and
in
doing the
here or
survey and
just
dropping it
clicking
off,
on the, yes.
Right.
or clicking on a link if you don't want to go,
Right.
or,
Okay.
you know, even
Multiple
like a third
ways.
option.
Multiple ways, whichever's easier for you, and then they can't say, well, I didn't
Yep.
get a chance to, you know.
You
it's-
can reply in this Facebook post, right? And then you give people 3 different ways they can get to it, and if that doesn't work,
Right.
Right, and that's why I was thinking about questionnaire to everybody. And the first question could be, do you live on the water, yes or no? Because in the mailing for the water bills, it
Yeah.
could go out, and maybe you don't live on there, but you still don't want to differentiate, it goes to this address, not that address, and all that. It's harder to administer as far as getting it done.
But cost-wise, it's a lot less.
yeah.
I mean, when you look at the people who live on the water versus they don't, at 50 cents a letter, that's a big expense for the city for people that.
If we're doing
if the-
separate, if we're doing
Yeah,
separate.
if the question's saying, would you be assessed, and do you live on the waterfront? Well, no, so,
Right.
you know, so just trying to look at it from both ends, the cost factor in getting directly to the people who it's gonna affect. Because I think it's going back to what the county's gonna say, well, what's the interest?
Right.
Right.
You know, and if you bring up and say, well, we mailed the whole city, and they go, so you sent it to people that don't live on the water? Well, how do you know this person that said, yes, I'm interested, is on the water or not on the water? We'd have to check where they live.
Right. Right.
I'm just trying to make it easier so we don't, the city or the county doesn't come back at us and say, well, you need to do it over again or this, whatever. If we only target the people living on the canals that we're talking about, and then we get an idea of who's interested. If it comes
Sorry.
out that they're only, 10% of the people even respond,
Right,
then we know what to tell the county.
Right.
okay.
Can I also make a suggestion? You may want to consider seeking a third party to do the survey entirely. That way you have no doubt about how the survey was done.
Yeah.
That might be
There's no
something
bias.
to consider, that there would be no question from, either City Hall or the county or anyone else wanted to take a look at that survey, and it was done by a third outside party. That way all the numbers and, there was no chance of any type of corruption, anything like that.
Do you have any idea what that type of thing would cost?
I don't know.
Have we done it before?
I can also, I'll pose that question.
And then how fast can we get it going? Because that's the other thing is that we want to, that's holding up everything here.
Right. Okay.
Well, let's get their questions. We can do that, and then we'll figure out,
Well, he's checking a couple of avenues.
right, what avenues are, but we got to have that list of questions
Right.
first. So let's do that as a takeaway. So, all right. So anything else as far as the questionnaire, right offhand?
No.
All right, should we go back into meeting one and familiarize ourselves with the channels so we're all on the same page as far as what channels are potentially being dredged versus what are not? Would that be?
Would not hurt.
Okay, so what I did was I put together a cheat sheet for me. So I thought if we got to this, I would share.
Yeah.
If you would pass this down
You
to
were
Sal.
resident, I would love one, yeah.
So, because I didn't remember everything either, and I went back to the list to identify those channels that were in scope and those channels that were out of scope. So if somebody asked a question, you knew this wasn't in, or your channel was out, or whatever it happened to be. Then I went through all the documentation that I had, not only in what Sal had given us on the first meeting with the notes, to identify how long the dredge length was, estimates of the volumes. So the 2019 there reflects that quote that we got. The dredge volumes was a minus 5 feet or a minus 6 feet. The dredge width was off of the information that the exhibits that Sal had sent, channel width, and then the canal width I went and looked at. So for example, if you're looking at channel 2 behind Chris, all right, that's a seawall to seawall width. So basically you had an idea, the dredge width for channel 2 was 18 feet, and the overall width of the channel was anywhere from 60 to 95, just to give you an idea what's really being dredged on there. And then I looked at the number of parcels from the property appraiser's office associated with that channel, and then going back to those dredge numbers in that quote, it averaged about $100 per cubic yard. So what I did was I put 100% allocation at that dredge quantity. I did a 50% assessment. Oftentimes what I've seen on paving, it's 50%. And then if you did a 5-year distribution, those were those numbers. So just playing around, just to get something there. So the information I didn't have, that I didn't carry out that far, were the out of scope channels. And some of these fell out even before my time. So for example, channel 30, there was a connection from Durney Key to Brasher Park entrance. It was about a mile long. I didn't even remember that. That was before my time.
I remember I was on the board with a lot of these, like Deidre Circle and all
Yep.
those. I think the problem with those is, and if I'm correct, and it's probably in here, they were never permitted.
Correct.
Because they were never official channels. They were things that were staked by residents, whatever, and they've been using them, but I don't think they were ever in official channels, you know?
Yeah.
So I know a lot of these back then, because we used to have a lot of the people from Deidre Circle and all these other places show up, and that was the problem. We could never get Army Corps to even look at those as channels or waterways or whatever. They were just, it was flats that people had been run across.
So my thought was that we could go through the channels, just start at the top, you know, one, okay, we know what one is. The one thing that I will note here is that you'll see on the dredge length, there are some differences in length. I can't explain some of those because it looks, they're from older documentation, newer documentation. I did not try to reconcile them. I just put the numbers that were there. Most of the others that only are single numbers are pretty close to what was in the exhibits in the permits that were attached in our earlier notes, okay?
Okay.
So,
Now, in all these, the pricing you have over here, the dredge totals,
yep,
is that off of the, what we have here?
yes, that's what I
Okay,
use.
That's with the $50,000 mobilization
Correct.
and 50, so, again, all these numbers depend upon how they did these. If they did certain at a time, you could take off hundreds of $1,000s just in that alone. If they don't have to take it down and we have a place
Right.
for them to put it until they start the next one,
Right.
you know?
Have no
Okay.
context around anything other than taking the numbers
Right.
in and dumping them in here for conversational piece.
Okay, so
And
the
that,
$100 that you put up here, basically a cubic yard, includes all that?
that's
It's
correct.
based off of those three assessments?
That's correct.
Or exhibits, okay, all right.
So, and then what that did was the numbers that rolled down there were the total amounts based on that. So gave us a ballpark, and again, this is for our own edification to get relative, what's the cost of that canal versus the total? It's a percentage of this. And I figured maybe that would help us to some extent to give us a little more context. So, and then like I said, the other thing was just going around counting the parcels that are there.
Right.
If we because the question comes out, if you're on the channel by Damon Court, I think I have this right, and there's 5 people, okay? Your per unit goes up a lot higher if you're on Damon Court.
Right.
But if you allocated this across all of these, okay, in the Miller's Bayou Basin, because the way this started out was there was a north basin off of Green Key, and not Green Key, I'm sorry, Green Street and Betty, okay, so the north channels. Then there was the Miller's Bayou channels, and then there were the rivers channels, all right?
Right.
So that's how that conversation started. It never carried through. But how we did that or how we recommended it could be any of the above. I don't know, but I wasn't going to worry about that now. I only did it this way to kind of get it.
Sure helps for
start.
perspective this way, right? It gives you at least rough ballpark.
Right. So what I was going to suggest, and I'll just take channel 1, for example, here to kind of give you.
Well, that's the commercial one, isn't it?
Right.
One,
That
yeah,
1 is the entrance into Miller's Bayou.
right, and that's the one we considered one, and what was it, 18?
18's back by Gildog and
One, well, no, not 18 then, it was 126
26A.
and 26A were, we considered commercial in the way that, well, not necessarily commercial, but they benefited everybody because that was the main that went into all the separate canals.
yeah.
Right. So when I allocated these costs, for example, 1 got allocated to everybody in the Miller's Bayou Basin. And 26 also got allocated to everybody in the Miller's Bayou Basin. That's what I did, not saying that's what we're going to do, but that's what these numbers reflect.
Okay, and then the other thing we had talked about is, for instance, is 26A, the one in front of Hooters, Gildog's, or not Hooters, but I mean, yeah, Hooters, Seaside, that whole, Nick's Park, that
Yeah.
whole area?
No, that 1, not 26.
Is that one?
Yes, that's
Okay.
1.
We had talked about the commercial properties there.
Yes,
Because, for instance, that's where all the shrimp boats are,
Right.
correct.
okay? The property owners of that, which currently are Sun Cruise, collect rent monthly for those slips there. So they're not included in this as far as their portion?
They would be one of the parcels.
They're one of the parcels. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so they're one of the 4 parcels.
Right, so for example, if you look at the drawing on Channel 1, the plan view in the packet that he sent, you can see several parcels there on the lower left of the page. Those 4, I basically carried it to about the turning basin using the measurements there, and that's how I determined it was 4 parcels. Okay. Now, the little hickey up that you run into is that Gill Dogs parallels all the way along Channel 18. They also face Channel 1. So that's kind of drove my let's allocate Channel 1 and 26 to anybody that experiences the benefit. But again, so that's what I did on these. And what I thought was that we would just review. Channel 1 is going to butt up to the Channel 26. You can see where 18 comes in. You can see the grass flats around it. I think essentially it's cutting through there. I didn't understand this cut because it seems to be going across flats that if you follow the natural channel along where the shrimp boats are, there'd probably be less material to dredge. And I think the grass flats extend all the way where that channel is now.
But they still cut across there.
But they still
at
cut
any
across
kind
it.
of moderate tide, yeah.
Yeah, they got a PVC pipe there that they basically line up with the dock
On the far side.
and go across. When we do this survey, we have to include the people who own those commercial properties. Shouldn't we?
Yes, I believe, I would think
Especially if
any,
you're talking about assessments.
right. I would say anybody that owns a parcel on there that could be impacted by this, we ought to reach out with the survey on. And again, if they choose to get back, great. If they not, okay.
Okay.
So
So if we're
The-
looking at,
length looked about right. I used the station markers there as far as to determine the length of the channel, and the volume, which was interesting on the quote, was 2610, but the volumes on earlier documentation was, it's above that range. I can't explain that. That's just the nature of the beast. The other thing that I did here is the channel width on the document. If you go down to the bottom of the Channel 1 plan view, that channel width there is 70 feet. And that's what that channel width reflects. If there was no boundary, i.e. bulkheads on either side, like in Channel 2, I just used the channel width as being 70 feet.
Okay.
Okay, so just to explain that. So that's what I was thinking about doing for the balance, to just go through, make sure we're comfortable with what it is or what it isn't. Does that make sense?
It does,
Yes.
very much
Okay.
so.
So moving on to Channel 3, because Channel 2 is out of scope, which is where you are, Chris. And I think it was purely for, there was grass in that particular one. So Channel 3 is.
and then,
I'm
like,
sorry, go
well, getting back to Channel 2,
Yes,
or Channel 3, that's
Okay.
Chris's.
No, Channel 2 is mine.
no, Channel 2 is Chris.
Channel 2 is yours. So that one's not on here, or that's down here.
Yeah, it's down out of
Okay.
scope. That was between Island and Waterside Drive. I use kind of the roads.
Well, I've been back in there twice. Is it the whole problem from Andy's
can-
house out?
Yes.
Everything else is
You
fine.
can look at.
So
there's
you're not talking
If you look at one of the pictures,
the length of 1,060.
it's really
You're talking about
not
probably
even Andy's. It's just the last
It's 100
15 feet.
15, 20 feet, okay.
Yeah. And,
Right.
and at low tide, you're clipping, my boat's clipping the prop going in.
Yeah.
Right,
So
right, okay.
anybody in anything bigger is not coming in or out, at any kind of zero tide.
Right.
But the rest of the canal's great. It's just the mouth of it. And some of that is, when the casino boat goes by. You're getting blowout right there.
Now, the question is my question there is, where does the river take over? At what point coming out of there? Because I know, you understand what I'm saying, Carl? Like, for instance, I know in my property, I'm all part of the river. I think your one half is all part of the river, right? And then the other half is part of the canal?
Well, let's just.
You understand what I'm saying? Because
Oh.
I know when we talked to DEP, they were specific about this is the canal and this is the river. And the river is under their jurisdiction.
Right.
So.
What was interesting when I went through this exercise, 3 was intriguing because I know the conversations that you and I have had. The length of this tail out of 3 goes in front of your house. So inherently, you're one of the parcels on Channel 3. So I could not to me, this tail goes out in the wrong place.
Right.
And I think if you go back to knowing some of the water around here, in like 2 or 3, what are we doing? I would think we'd be following the line of the river as being the termination of the channel, all right?
Yeah.
So I think there's benefit to go through and have, before any of these went forward, to say, let's make sure we understand the route and where we're going on these. It
Right,
doesn't
because
make
that
sense.
would totally change the whole assessment if you're going, for instance, on Channel 2, it says 1,060 versus, say, 50 feet.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't think 2 is part of the survey, so I can't tell you how far
Well,
out it
and
goes.
it might not have been, and
Yeah.
that brings up the point, did they consider that where it was part of the river?
I think what happened with 2, there was some grass, and I don't know where. If it was, I assume it was at the mouth. I do not know.
There's no
But
grass there now.
I think this could be looked at to say, hey, because recognize the survey for the grass was done in like 10 years ago.
Right.
When?
10 years ago.
Yeah.
So what's there now, do not know. So I think on any of these, if Chris and several of his neighbors came up and said, hey, we need to look at 2 closer, I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm just looking at this old aerial photo here, and it shows that everything is on the riverside.
Yeah.
There's this whole canal going in.
But
So-
but it depends on, like with 3, if that channel goes on out and goes all the way around to where your house is, what does 2 do?
There
It just
used to
depends on
be,
how it's
if you
surveyed.
talk to old man Safranik that used to live down our canal, he told us that it used to be a channel that came in front of Garen's and in front of my house, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Now, was it a marked channel, or was it they used to come out that way and it just got deeper? Because it's the marked channel's out.
Yeah.
And I know on my survey, in Garen's survey, our lot lines extend out in the river. They don't end at the seawall. They go out,
Really?
yes. So we were always under the impression that if there's any dredging done for our properties, it will be when they do the river, if they would come over. Most likely not. We're kind of on our own because we're considered on the river, and we have to follow guidelines for docks and everything according to the markers and everything else, not in canals where it's third. So, I don't know. I mean,
And that's part of the reason why I wanted to go through these, because there's things here that I was frankly surprised at when I looked at it and went, that's interesting. So I figured if we did this before there was people from Channel 3 or 4 or 5, at least we have some context and discussion beforehand, and we're not going through a first discovery with folks.
okay.
But that was one of the things that jumped out for me on 3 was how far it went out.
And when you basically look at these, because I know eventually when we come in front of citizens that live on the water and they do respond and they want to come here, and if they look at something and it says assessment, a lot of these canals, when you look at it, for instance, even the canal where you're at, a lot of the canals are fine. It's entranceways or some other parts. So when these figures say the length of the canal, is it including the part that doesn't really need it?
Right.
I mean, there's a few canals in there that even at low tide, there's no problem getting in and out.
Well, and that's where I assume in the schematic, so the Channel 3 plan view, what it shows is through the entrance, because there is that ridge there between 29 and 31, all right, that it appears they're cutting through. The natural channel is right off of my dock, due south from Channel 3 to the channel. That's the deepest spot.
Sure.
Unless you hug along where Garen's and your place, there's that natural swash that goes off the end of my property over. But so what they're showing here is the dredge area goes several lots in, and then there's a little bit there at the turning basin down where Larry's place is.
Right.
And they're leaving out the in-betweens that they're assuming is deep enough. But
Where do they come up with the yardage or the length then?
well, the length is the length that I put in there is the full station to station length of the channel. So from where it shows to where it ends, that's that number. Okay.
Right.
The dredge volume theoretically is
Okay.
only that gray area,
Okay.
but I could not validate those numbers.
Okay.
All right. So
All right.
does that make sense?
It does.
On 3?
Yeah, it does. It's. I just know people are going to ask questions.
Right.
I can see a lot of them right now. I got plenty of water behind my house. I don't need a dredge behind my house.
Right.
I need it out there when I try to go out.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Just something I'd be
and then
willing to pay for.
That throws your assessment completely off, because if you're only dredging from here to the wall, but is that where the mobilization of 50,000 comes in and then 50,000 to take it out? You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just tough.
Yeah, and so for example, on 3, if you only had that little area back by Larry's house, are you gonna say, Larry, you want that dredged? Is that allocated to you because it's behind your house? Or is because we're doing dredging in Channel 3, everybody has a lesser portion?
Yeah.
And it's because all the way in, but that's an interesting philosophical question
It is.
that we'd have to
Yeah.
go through.
Right.
I looked at it from the standpoint Channel 3, and then Channel 3 in, Channel 3 out. And then we have to go to the question, if half of us say, I'm in, and half of us say, thumbs down, what's the answer?
Yeah, I think that we just need to get the surveys out and make them very simple.
Yep.
Do you live on the water? Are you interested in dredging in your canal? Would you be open to pay an assessment? Plain and simple.
Right.
And then if we get no response, then you go from there. Because, a lot of people you might find might say, I've been boating here for 15 years, I never have a problem, I'm not worried about it.
I don't have a stinking sailboat.
Right.
Okay, so moving on to Channel 4, which is the channel between Brighton and Caney Court. This was the one that I really couldn't understand because in some of my documentation that I had.
Is that Salton's channel now?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't understand that 1,000-foot length.
I don't either.
The 411 looked reasonable based on what the channel
Yeah, 'cause
is
there's,
showing.
well, there's 6 parcels. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's 6. I can tell you right now, that channel, you can get in and out whenever you want. At the
Right.
very end off of Terry's dock, there's a oyster bed that's
Right.
marked with PVC pipe. It's
Yep.
been there marked for 20 years, and as long as you go to the left side of it, you're good.
Okay.
Right.
So,
So that was that. Any other thoughts on the Caney?
Caney is the one where Mike and Gina.
Oh, yeah, Caney and Channel. the next one. That would be Mike and Gina's.
Yeah,
and,
they got, the people who have problems there is all the way up in the corner. Mike, Ross, up in that, because that's the dead end. Yeah, but the rest of it, nothing. You know what I mean? So,
But the other thing that I don't understand here is once it extends past what I consider the channel location, so the properties from Charlie's and Michelle's to Yankees, I kind of view that as the end of the channel.
Yeah, but it's
It
got-
goes out into the flats there. Because the ingress and egress around there, like Monique, she'll go along the seawall for the most part, rather than going into that middle area.
Right.
right. But we don't know where the original, like for instance, it is there. Did it used to come this way and around? Or does it just, it's just a big old bay and everybody just goes that way?
Oh, yeah, the basin that's in there, I agree. So all of this data would probably be, I'm guessing, 13 years old.
There's some channels here that we all know that are problem channels.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the one between Aquila and Channel.
Yeah, Yep.
And it's very funny with that channel. The harbor aisle side is deep. The other half is rock.
It's
It's like
rocks. Yeah.
they dynamited one half out, and the other half they left alone. So the condo side is the one that has problems with their floaters and their boats.
Yep.
The other side is fine. As long as you hug this side, you're fine. So again, I can see a survey on that one. Our side's great. You guys dig out your side. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right.
It's just one of those things. Most of your channels that are bad are the ones that are up in 14, 24, 15, all these up in here,
Right.
and these over in here a little bit,
yep.
okay?
Yeah, that northeast corner.
All this mostly, right here, it's minimal. So, which might help as far as the overall thing here, because you're not talking, if we do get money,
How much
and
you
you're
need.
only
You're
using.
not talking about.
So I think a lot of it's got to be prioritized as far as how bad the channels too.
Right.
I mean, because to take a little piece out of here that'll help one person in this canal, because it might be towards the end, and then have a canal where it's going to help all 20 homes, we've got to look at that.
Yeah, and I don't know, Channel 3 was the only one that I really saw tapered or dropping off. Every one of the channels as far as their cross profiles, they show pretty much the entire channel being maintained.
Yeah.
All right? Don't have the data, don't know why, but that's what they're showing. So I think there's a tailoring that should be done or could be done that we may need to recommend.
Right. Right.
So, okay. Do we need to go through like Shoreview, any of those up there? Channel 7?
Where short view is 7.
Yep.
I know for instance 7, it's not in the canal.
It's the mouth.
It's the mouth has an oyster bed.
Right.
Okay, so that's that one. 8 has the same thing. Actually, you can even see it in this little picture here. You can see the bar that goes right across both of them right there.
Right.
Okay, again, the canals are fine. It's the access. I don't know much about 9. I don't know much about 10.
So the one thing that we're coming away with here is that there is certainly probably tailoring that could be done. And I don't know how much of this was self-serving to the entities doing the dredging, because the more that they can get, the more that goes in their pocket versus from a practical standpoint, what do you really need to have for true boat access?
Well, yeah, and when you look at what they have here, you're talking about a full dredging of the whole city. And what we're
Right.
kind of looking at is that there's a lot of canals that really only need a little spot, and then that's it.
Yeah, instead of
You know?
200 feet of dredging, we need 12 feet of dredging. Right. Yeah.
You
It
know,
looks like
so
a lot of that.
now when this was when this was put together, you pulled this off of the records you got. When they put this out to bid, this was back when they said, okay, here's our canals. All these canals need to be done. Bid it.
Right.
But they
Right.
didn't actually, when they went in there, went to each canal and said, well, everything's fine here, we just need 20 feet out over here. So, and maybe it's because you won't get a dredging company to come in and do that.
Could be.
I don't know.
And I don't either, but they theoretically surveyed all of these things at some point.
Sure.
Well, these permits started when?
You know,
Go
the
back
the
to
original
2000.
permit came out in like '08.
Yeah.
So the work had to be done in '06, '07.
Right.
I remember. I was, I think, still on the board. Okay, so
Yeah.
it was a long, long time ago.
Right.
Right.
And you're talking probably 13, 14 years ago.
Yeah,
So, that's why I say, I don't know what they were told, bid everything? And is there a certain, like, we want every canal at a mean low 5 feet, right? Okay, so that's what they did. And they just, across every canal, that's what they looked at, okay? I don't know.
We want the a la carte menu, right? That's probably where we'll have to get when we get to the
That-
final recommendation.
that's,
Yeah, because with the public input, I mean, I'm just looking at it from a standpoint, if I'm looking at my canal and going, I've been here 20 years, I've never had a problem, my problem is that 20 feet right there.
Right.
I don't need 5 or 6 feet mean low because we've always been able to get out of here. Now, if I had a 45-foot Bertram that I'm trying to stuff back in there, well then, yeah, I'd say I need more.
I mean, maybe at some point we have to get a dredging company in to educate us a little bit as far as what's practical. Do you need 10,000 yards to come in and do a project? Do you need,
Looks like all they need is mobilization and demobilization.
and they're good.
All right.
So
Yeah.
there's
You
got to
break
be
it down
a
every
critical,
weekend? Yeah.
there's got to be a critical amount to get
Yeah.
them to come in.
Yeah,
So-
and I'm sure there is, and maybe that's the thing that really stuck out is that fee just to set up and then take it away is half the price of everything you're doing. The work itself, when you look at the cubic yards they pull out, was not that much, and even to haul the stuff away on the one bid was not that much.
Right.
It's getting it there and then taking it down and then coming back and putting it up, and so that's where we need to have somebody come in from a dredge company and say, what all is involved here?
Well, the other thing that changed was originally this went in as a hydraulic dredge, and then that quote came back as a mechanical. So with the mechanical, you are generally, it's a whole different technique. I don't know what the cost is, differential, but that's the big difference between when we started with the permits to when that went in there.
And then my other question is, and that's why I think we need to talk to a dredge company, is when you get into the canals over on Quist, like for instance, I think it's 24 or 14, channel 14, it's just rock.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not gonna just come in there and suck the muck out and that's it. It's
Some
rock.
of it's rock.
It's rock. So
Some of it's muck, some of it's rock and oysters.
a lot of it is rock and oysters. So was that considered in here? Because when they say cubic yard, are they just saying whatever the material is? Or if they have to go in there and actually chip everything away and all that, does it change that canal? Okay, because, so,
Let me do this in that I have some documentation on the sample dredge they did in the canals. I'm sorry, wrong statement. I have the boring samples that were done that gives a profile. So there was a sample done. Let me shoot that to you guys to look at to go with this,
Okay.
because I didn't remember seeing any rock in any of these areas. Most of the rock was below. Now, they didn't do a lot of samples, They didn't do, there was maybe like one in a canal. Let me get that, shoot it out to you
Yeah,
so we
'cause
can
if-
have that for
If you look
context.
at channel 14
Yep,
Yeah.
at a dead low tide and look down there,
Could it be oyster beds on top of muck? I mean,
It's
I've
solid.
seen, we walk past that every day.
it's
right?
solid.
Yeah, it looks
It's
solid.
solid.
Yeah.
Okay, but again, now you get into oyster beds. Is that a different, not
Right.
only take it out, but is that a different way you have to deal with swift mud as far as removing those? I mean, these samples were done and everything was done so long ago.
Yeah.
Can we still use that information to go off of? And again, if,
let me send it to you, and then we
Okay,
can take a
will
look
do.
at it. The
Okay.
bores went down to refusal, so that means they hit limestone. The ones that I saw were pretty deep, much below this.
Okay.
So it's 8 o'clock.
all right,
We did not get through all of these, but I would suggest take a look, and then if we have any, at our next meeting, if there's anything else that comes to mind on it, I'll send you those bore samples. We're going to plan on meeting on the 2nd. And then we'll also, on the second meeting, look to have our questionnaire questions. And if we can agree on that, then we can get them over to Sal and figure out. how
yeah,
we
because
get
I
them
think that's, we definitely need to get that out to the property owners.
Thanks for putting this together. That's super helpful.
out. Cool. All right, so are there any other things that anybody'd like to get in before we potentially adjourn? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.